Welcome to the Christian County Coal Mine Museum in Taylorville, Illinois. It was founded by the late Will Stone. Today's curator is Chuck Martin. This presentation uses archival photographs and oral histories to honor the events that brought about improvements in work conditions and wages in the coal mine industry during the early 1900s. Oral histories recorded in the early 1980s of surviving Christian County coal miners and their families were used by Carl Oblinger to write Divided Kingdom, a history of the coal mine wars, which was published in 1991. These interviews are available in our museum's research room, as well as online through the University of Illinois in Springfield's archive collection. At the Christian County Coal Mine Museum, you can hear the voices of the people who were interviewed in 1985 and 86. In our museum, you'll learn about cave-ins, gas explosions, poisoned air, and if you think it'll be safe on the surface, you're wrong. There will be gunfights, bombings, and National Guard troops with Gatling guns and machine guns. Towns you may never have heard of, like Taylorville, Pana, Kincaid, Tovey, Bullpit, Jeiseyville, Hewitteville, Langleyville, Assumption, and Mowequa. There will be as much action as in the American West of old. Some people say that more blood flows here than in a vampire movie, and that's because who we are is not always who we must be to survive. The men and women of the early 1900s gave us the greatest generation. Now, this is their story.
Area in the bottom of the miner's bucket that they put water in there. That's how they carried their water to drink. And the top is where they had their lunch. And the old saying is, if they had some kind of a grievance and they say, "Oh, what are we going to do?" Well, they throw that. Well, if we throw the water up, it stays up in the air. Well, we'll go ahead and work. If it comes and hits the ground, we'll strike. That's the old cliche about the coal miners. But anyway,
so that would be a wildcat strike.
Wildcat strike, absolutely.
Around this area.
Wonderful work, and they were people that were proud of their heritage and proud to be coal miners. They kept, if you look at the community of Taylorville, Kincaid, Bullpit, the homes were kept up well, and they were just proud people. They were the second, most of them, men mine number 10, was the second generation coal miners from the old country.
What countries were they from mostly?
Well, they were from England. Ireland, some Scots, Italian, Croatian, and Hungary, and all those countries in Europe that had coal mines. But they were the next generation after the generation that came in. They were the second generation coal miners.
Right.
There was a few first generation coal miners in my time. There was several people that came from Italy and what have you that we had. And that is what made the world great.
How much did the coal miners get paid? That's what finally made the miners mad enough to try and unionize. They lowered the wages 16% to 58 cents per ton and a half. If a miner had a good day and brought out 16 tons, that would be less than $6 a day. The mines don't work year-round, do they? Miners must save part of their wages for downtime during the summer months. Besides the pay cut, Our boys also had to buy the new safety lights and explosives from the company store. Oh, that company store. The company stopped the Union from coming in and fired hundreds of strikers. My Johnny was one of them. That's why we came to Illinois, so we could work your mine. You've got the United Mine Workers to help you.
I've never had a roof fall on me, never was injured bad. All the years worked in a mine. My dad was a timberman. These guys takes care of the top. And he told me, I'm going to show you one time only, he said. He got a pick, he said, come with me. Went into one of them rooms, it was quiet. He said, how would you sound that top? I said, I don't even know. He said, okay, took his pick, put his hand up on the roof, and just tapped it lightly. He said, put your hand up there. Now take the pick and hit it lightly up there. You feel the vibration? I said, no. He said, it's good. Went a little farther. He tapped it again. He said, come here, try this. I said, yep, it's kind of hollow-like. He said, all right, it's got to be timbered. He said, don't let nobody make you want that kind of a top. Nobody. You tell them if they want to go on it, let them go. You go the other way.
So that's how you sounded a roof. Did you tell some people sometime, I'm not going under that?
No, already, didn't they already? I was in there already.
Uh-huh.
I said, I ain't going in there.
Yeah.
Because I seen a couple of guys that went along, they used to have a pocket like that and be a dome like a rock.
Uh-huh.
And if you hit it too hard, you trigger it. Down she comes.
Yeah.
Because I seen two guys done that, both of them were underneath it.
Uh-huh. Get killed or?
Flat as a pancake. He said, don't hit it hard. When I worked number 10, these young bosses come along with that ball bearing on a rod, they'd ram it up against the top. I'd beat it.
That'd be it, huh?
I beat it.
Oh, you beat it.
I beat it. And let them stay there and do that. I don't care. That's the worst thing in the world, to hit it real hard. Just tap it gently. You know what it is.
And my dad would stay in and tamp the holes and do the shooting. And he said one time, he said, I guess because he'd never quit smoking, was he had all the holes tamped and had lit the fuse. And when he turned to leave, there was a gust of air come in and blew his carbide lamp out. And he said he didn't know which way to go, because then you're in a coal mine, the lights go out, you see nothing. You can touch your nose and not see your finger.
Yeah.
And he said he couldn't see a thing, and he said finally he happened to think that he had a cigarette lit in his mouth, and he puffed on it real hard, got it glowing good, and got his light lit. And when he hung his light on his head, on his cap again, turned around and looked, he had his back right square up against the face with all those shots loaded and lit. And he said he run like the devil was after him, and he said he just got around the corner in the entry when they went off. Otherwise, if he hadn't got his lamp lit, he'd have been blowed up right there. But that was as close as he ever come to getting injured.
They had a wreck out here in 58 on the main line. That's before I went to work. And they had mules. And they called everybody out to clean up the wreck. And the first goddamn question old Bill Hardy said was, did they hurt the mule?
Yeah.
That's the truth. That's the way it was. And Bill said, by God, we have to buy a mule, but you can hire another man. Yes, sir. No, they didn't get much benefits when they lost a husband and in the mine.
Yeah.
He got hurt.
Where at?
My dad introduced me to a coal mine at 3 foot of coal. And I'm 6'4".
So you had to get down and crawl through it, huh?
On my hands and knees.
Yeah.
He drilled down there with what they call a post drill. He drilled the holes. I made the powder and the dummies, and we tamped the holes, picked the start for it, shot her on a solid out of there.
How old were you when you did that?
Oh, just not even 17 yet. But I worked there for a week. I had to sit down and shovel. I said, Pop, time to get out of here. I said, I don't like this place.
Yeah.
Well, we left and I went to work number 9. The strike was on.
A Negro boy was about 12 years old would hitch up a set of goats, and he'd pull the heavy boxcar through the narrow tunnels. From there, small ponies took the cars to the surface to be checked and weighed. We had an electric locomotive on the east side of the mine, but in them low mines, nothing could sure beat a team of goats or dogs. Joke was, if we ever got stuck down there, at least we'd have some fresh meat. I used to hire mostly Italians because they're shorter. I had a skinny German once who's about 6'3". He got stuck in a turn. We had to cut his leg off at the knee just to get him out. We tied a wood crutch to his thigh. He mined for years with a little fellow who lost his right leg. Between the two of them, there ain't a vein turned small enough that one of them can't squeeze through.
A lot of us women folk worked the coal mine in West Virginia during the Great War. I've worked a mine before, and a 3-foot one at that. I shoveled coal on my hands and knees. You ever worked a 3-foot vein before? Well, when I was a young'un, I could squeeze myself as small as a mouse going through a crack in a wall. Patch communities often sprang up in remote locations where coal could be found. Though lacking in conveniences, the miners were not lacking in ingenuity. They could always find a way to bathe and get cleaned up for that all-important nightcap of home brew at the local tavern. Boys as young as 10 were often used as rock pickers to clear rock and sulfur out of the coal. As these boys became men, they developed a friendly fraternity away from work that would become useful when fighting the company for better wages and working conditions.
In researching Central Illinois coal mine history, we discovered that Illinois became the first successful state for the United Mine Workers of America. We believe that the United Mine Workers were more successful in Illinois because most of the mines had 6-foot seams of coal that were easier and safer to work compared to the many 3-foot mines in Kentucky and West Virginia. Also, survival during a strike was easier in Illinois because miners had gardens, livestock, orchards, hunting and fishing, as well as opportunities to find temporary employment in nearby cities like Chicago, St. Louis, Decatur. Many coal miners who believed in Prohibition said they more easily survived the 1920s and even early 30s because they wasted less money on alcohol and gambling. Interestingly, especially during the early 1920s, many became members of the Ku Klux Klan, not to support white supremacy, although that was certainly a part of it, but mainly to enforce the Volstead Act. On the other hand, there were those coal miners who sold bootleg liquor during Prohibition. They were often Catholics, especially French and Italians. All of these factors, plus the assistance of the Shelton, Berger, and Capone gangs buying the bootleg liquor, created an atmosphere whereby Illinois coal miners were able to survive during strikes and become the most radical in the nation. The second major discovery that the Christian County Coal Mine Museum made came about thanks to Rosemary Fuhrer, a professor at Northern Illinois University. It involved the relationship between 3 significant communities in 1898 and 99. The 3 Illinois communities that brought about the early successes of the United Mine Workers in 1898 were Verdun, Pana, and Carterville. It is probable that there were African Americans, United Mine Workers, and even National Guardsmen that were present at least two, if not all three, of these events. Special thank you to these historians, especially longtime Pana schoolteacher Eleanor Burhorn, who in 1949 wrote a thesis on the strike of coal miners at Pana. Also to Millie Meyerholtz, one of the fantastic journalists from the Pana News Palladium, who wrote a paper called When Hatred and Fear Ruled. The 1898 recruitment of black miners from Alabama and Tennessee was an effort by the coal companies to defeat the fledgling United Mine Workers of America. Many people believe that slavery ended with the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution in 1865. That's simply not true. The amendment says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. Therefore, the Southern states interpreted this to allow them to arrest blacks on trumped-up charges and put them back into bondage. These convict leasing programs were simply slavery by another name. African American males were arrested on trumped-up charges and given long prison sentences. Most of Alabama's convicts worked in the coal mines around Birmingham, where in some years 25% of all black convicts died. In 1898, nearly 73% of Alabama's total revenue came from convict leasing. In order to escape the Jim Crow South and convict leasing, blacks were seduced by posters such as this one. Note that it does not mention any of the conflict that they were to enter. Many of the blacks that came in 1898-99 were recruited by coal companies in Pana, Verdun, and Carterville, Illinois, to become strikebreakers. This is an authentic photograph of the first blacks arriving in Pana, Illinois on August 25th, 1898. By the end of the year, 700 to 1,000 African Americans lived there. Most were inside a fortified stockade or in a shotgun house that was dubbed by locals as the Alabama Coon Hotel. The housing was unsanitary and caused much illness. The first major gun battle in Pana, Illinois was on September 28, 1898. Although newspapers claimed that over 100 shots were fired and it had begun when the African Americans fired into the whites, the ending result was that only 5 African Americans were wounded and no white people. The next day, the governor sent the state militia into Pana with 10 officers and 176 soldiers. This is an authentic photograph of them arriving at the Pana train station. Because the state militia was protecting the entry of blacks into Pana, 200 masked Union miners intercepted a train west of the little village of Tower Hill. The train was carrying 60 Negro strikebreakers. They removed the blacks from the train and marched them along the railroad track back to Tower Hill, where they were placed on an eastbound train to Indiana. On October 4th, more black strikebreakers successfully arrived. This time they were under the protection of the state militia, who rode on the train from Indianapolis. Unable to stop the influx of blacks into Pana, Illinois, many of the United Mine Workers that were on strike there traveled to Verdun. On October 12, 1898, 5 train passenger cars bringing black strikebreakers to work the coal mine were stopped. A gunfight erupted between the coal company guards that were assigned to protect them and the United Mine Workers who were attempting to keep the African Americans out. 7 to 9 United Mine Workers were killed, along with 4 to 6 company guards. Several blacks were wounded, though none died. The train left Verdun and went on to Springfield, Illinois. Some blacks left the train under the protection of the United Mine Workers. Others chose to not go back to the Jim Crow South and its convict leasing. They were forced to remain on the train in Springfield for 3 days. Finally, the coal company agreed to the United Mine Worker demands and told the remaining blacks, "Go home, we don't want you no more." The third major discovery of the Christian County Coal Mine Museum was that some of the blacks after Verdun came to work in the Pana coal mines in Christian County. Following the October 12th Battle of Verdun, Governor Tanner made a mistake of sending half the state militia troops that were stationed in Pana over to Verdun. That left Pana woefully unprotected. According to local legend, the United Mine Workers in Pana took advantage of this lapse in militia protection. They stopped a train east of the Tower Hill area and murdered a boxcar of African Americans that were being brought into Pana to strike break. Although no bodies have ever been discovered, we know of 5 theories of where the bodies were disposed of. One theory is that they were in a potter's field east of the town. Another, they were in a gravel pit up on Williamsburg Hill. A third theory is that they were thrown down an air shaft 700 feet and then dynamited in. The fourth theory, that they were in a slag pile inside the Penwell mine yard. And the fifth theory, that they are near the Boy Scout grounds that is to this day still known as the Nigger Cemetery. By March 25th, 1899, Governor Tanner believed that the town of Pana could now be controlled by the newly elected officials, who were all, by the way, on the side of the United Mine Workers. He ordered the withdrawal of the Illinois militia. Almost immediately, other Union men from various communities were brought into Pana with the intention of running the blacks out of town. This resulted in a major gun battle in Pana on April 10th, 1899. This sad day would become known to Pana residents as the Big Trouble. 7 people died. 5 black strikebreakers, 1 a woman, 1 white United Mine Worker striker, and 1 bystander. At least 16 people were also wounded. 6 Pana bystanders, 2 United Mine Work strikers, 7 black strikebreakers, and 1 white coal company security guard. The leader of the African American strikebreakers in Pana was named Henry Stevens. He was described as 6 feet 2 inches tall and very muscular. Stevens would later be immortalized by Illinois poet Carl Sandburg in The Sayings of Henry Stevens. Historian Rosemary Fuhrer has been researching his life. She's the Associate Professor of History at Northern Illinois University, and she believes she may have found the burial site of Stevens in Springfield, Illinois. The drama on April 10th began when Stevens went to visit several blacks who were being held in the Pana jail. When he tried to talk to his friends through the outside grated window, they shied away from him. A deputy sheriff quickly appeared, and a gunfight began between the 2 men. Other deputies arrived, and Stevens quickly sought shelter in the Penwell Company store. A Union miner named Xavier Leacock was the first to die, quite possibly from friendly fire shot from a white policeman. When deputies blasting at him and wounded in the neck, Stevens surrendered. He was quickly transported by train to the Taylorville jail. Following the arrest of Henry Stevens, hundreds of black strikebreakers rallied along with their white security guards. A gun battle began that lasted for hours. With strikebreakers firing at them from the mine towers, Union men took up positions in the second-floor buildings, including the Pana Opera House. 5 blacks were then killed and several others chased. They only escaped when they sought refuge by turning themselves in to the city jail. Shouts and threats of lynching the captured blacks was only averted with the arrival of the state militia. Sheriff Tom Downey, a UMW supporter, later stated in an interview in an Illinois State Journal that his deputies would have helped, not hindered, the striking miners in the lynchings. Once again, the state militia arrived in Pana. This time they were just barely in time to prevent the mass execution of dozens of African Americans. One of the things we wanted to know was who were those people who were killed or wounded on April 10, 1899 in the Pana, Illinois gunfights. What we found was that those blacks who were killed on April 10th included Julia Lash, who was either taking a gun to the mine or was attempting to take one. Charles Watkins, a Negro miner from Georgia, was killed while in the tower at the Penwell mine, and killed on the streets of Flatham during the gunfight were Henry Johnson, Louis Hooks, and James L. James. The fourth major discovery of local historians concerns where those 5 blacks that were killed on April 10th are buried in Pana. Their burial sites may have been found thanks to Millie Meyerholtz, Larry Gibson, Bill Holthouse of Pana, along with Steve Donasso, the professor from Indiana State University. The bodies are believed to be buried in the Twin Pines Potter's Field, just east of Pana, Illinois, which is west of Linwood Cemetery. The Rock Island Angus newspaper of April 13, 1899, said that on Tuesday, April 11, 1899, coroner inquests were held for African American dead. Burial in Potter's Field to take place that date or soon after. All of the colored victims were to be buried in the Potter's Field. According to Eleanor Burhorn, the first person killed on April 10th was Xavier Leacock, a French Union miner who had been killed by one of the shots fired during the chase of Henry Stevens from the jail to the store. Leacock had been in one of the many saloons and had stepped in the street to determine the cause of the shooting. The question as to who fired the fatal shot was hotly contested. Many individuals held Cheney responsible, while others accused Stevens. The citizens who recalled the incident in 1949 believed that the fatal shot was discharged from Cheney's gun, and that Leacock had been accidentally killed by his friends. Southern Illinois historian John Foster did a little digging into Xavier Leacock's history. He found that Xavier had married 18-year-old African-American Amelia Mulatto on November 2nd, 1895 in Vigo County, Indiana. Nothing more was found concerning this marriage or Amelia. This marriage also ended at some point prior to the April 10th, 1898 shooting of Xavier. The reason the marriage ended could have been possibilities such as death, infidelity, divorce, or even problems due to theirs being a mixed-race marriage. Regardless of their reason for their divorce, it's interesting that of the 2 white people who were killed on April 10th, One of them was married to a black woman. The inscription on the monument says, "A martyr in the cause of labor who lost his life on April 10th, 1898 in the city of Pana." His monument is located in the Calvary Catholic Cemetery west of Pana and donated by the United Mine Workers of America. The other white killed during the April 10th shooting was Frank Coburn, the son of the ex-sheriff. Frank was killed while standing in a barn. Coburn had taken refuge in the barn when the firing began. Each side denied responsibility for Coburn's death. Because the barn was in a direct line with the Penwell mine tower, the Union accused the operators. However, the doctor who examined the body declared the bullet came from ground level from where the UMWA were firing. Also, other citizens testified at the inquest that Union miners were in the valley near the barn during the firing and had killed Coburn because his father had protected the blacks when he was Christian County Sheriff. Frank Coburn is buried in Mound Cemetery west of Pana. His name is on the granite marker for his grandparents. Enos Coburn is prominent on the west side of the marker, while F.W. Coburn is on the east side with dates of birth and death. For the next several months after the April 10th gunfight, there was occasional gunfire, but the state militia mostly kept the peace by going to homes and confiscating weapons. Then in June of 1899, realizing they were defeated, all 4 Pana coal companies shut down and began an effort to push the blacks out of town. Most of the African American community was left destitute, with no income and no way to pay their way back to Alabama. The United Mine Workers of America and the state of Illinois eventually funded many of the blacks who wanted to leave. This is an authentic photograph of the blacks boarding a train in the summer of 1899. Some blacks who did have personal money took a train for Kansas to become strikebreakers there. Others, including Henry Stevens, moved to Springfield, Illinois in search of work in those mines. Many would still be in Springfield during the 1908 race riot that burnt down much of the African American community. When the Pana coal mines closed, Carterville coal mine operator Samuel Brush recruited 120 African Americans from those mines. The train carrying them was attacked by United Mine Work strikers when it stopped at a small town. Most of those United Mine Workers were African Americans, who Brush had recruited as strikebreakers the year before, but had been convinced to join the UMW. No one knows for certain how many blacks died during the June 30th gunfight in Carterville. The next day, the black Pana miners burnt down the homes of the UMW blacks and fought a battle throughout a wooded area that lasted all day. Some historians speculate that the battle left 9 Union men and 10 coal company guards dead. In the days to come, at least 6 Pana blacks died and a dozen more were wounded. The confrontations at Pana, Verdun, and Carterville in 1898-99 were most likely a major part of the reason that so many communities in Illinois became sundown towns. African Americans were not allowed within the city limits from dusk until dawn. Many of the residents of Pana remember signs like that being put outside their city until as late as 1970. The Negro Motorist Green Book on the left was used from 1936 to 66 by African Americans so they knew where the sundown towns were. A newly released 2018 motion picture references that book. The Cherry Mine disaster of November 21st, 1909 is important to Christian County coal mine history because after the disaster, over 60 families moved from Cherry, Illinois to Christian County. Most settled near Kincaid, Bulpit, Tovey, and Jeiseyville.
It was supposed to have been the safest mine in the world. It was one of the young boys who pushed the car full of hay under a torch on the wall. He was just a child. He didn't know no better. There'd been fires in the mine before. Some of the men walked right past it like it weren't nothing. They could have put it out, but they figured they were leaving and they wanted to get home. So let the next guy do it. They had to make these torches so they could see to work, 'cause the electric lighting failed, don't you see? They should have just come on home and worked another day. But they were used to carbide lights, so they didn't think nothing of it. They shouldn't let inexperienced young boys work down there. They should have just come on home and worked another day.
This is an authentic photograph of firefighters at the Cherry Mine disaster trying to put out the fire that is below ground. 259 men and boys died in the Cherry Mine disaster. Many of them were found hugging one another in death. This is a photograph of people lining up trying to identify the bodies of the men who had been brought up from the disaster. This is an authentic photograph of one of the many temporary tent morgues that was put up to store the bodies. Six times the cage came up with survivors, but the seventh trip found the 12 rescuers burnt to death. The picture on the right is of two of the men who volunteered to go down. In this row of 30 company houses, only 4 men survived the disaster. Unbelievably, 21 miners survived for 8 days by walling themselves up into a chamber for protection from the poisonous black damp. As a result of the Cherry Mine disaster, several laws were enacted that made mining safer and cracked down on child labor. The Illinois Workmen's Compensation Act held companies responsible for an injured or killed worker. In the years following the disaster, over 60 families moved from Cherry, Illinois to Christian County. Most settled near Kincaid, Bulpit, Tovey, and Jeiseyville. They were known as the most safety conscious of all the coal miners. Some called them sounders because they checked their tops so often.
Who's Mother Jones? Why, she's a famous union activist, don't you know? She travels the country helping workers who are being mistreated. She told our boys to go home and rest, and let the women do the picketing for a while. Why, we women were harder on the strike breakers than our men were. We knew how those scabs were taking the bread out of our children's mouths, so we really let 'em have it, I tell you.
When the machines did come in,
say in 1929, which was a big year for the machines,
Yeah.
how did the company decide who to lay off?
The company at that time, there was no seniority or anything else. It happened through nutrition more than anything else, if you understand what I mean by that word. In other words, you were mechanically inclined, you would make up a coal crew. Now they kept, these mines here, they kept the hand loaders in one area. They did not mechanize the whole coal mine at one time. They kept the hand loaders in an area, and the hand loaders would still work and do their work and everything, but the machines would be in another area, and then finally through nutrition took a lot of it out. And that's what the progressives couldn't understand, and John L. Lewis made in one of his famous talks about mechanization, made the statement that we have to mechanize progress. You cannot stop progress. And he believed this wholeheartedly. Of course, I knew the man personally, so I was a little bit different than a lot of them. And he was, and that's the reason we mechanized so easily in this area. We did not start it all at one time. It started out, well, let's go back to mechanization. If you want to talk about mechanization, we will. The first loading machine that was developed was called Joy Jr.
5BU?
No,
No?
no,
Not that
one before that one.
Oh,
Joy Jr. was made from Model A Ford parts. We used to buy a lot of our parts for these first loaders.
Under hand loading, miners were responsible for their own safety. They sounded their own tops, did their own timbering when necessary, and laid their own tracks. Most miners blasted their own chambers before they went home nights. They let the dust settle, then loaded when they first came in the morning and the air was cleaner. When mechanization arrived in the 1920s, all of these tasks were done by specialists. Now the miners had to trust others to do these tasks safely. Also, coal companies often didn't train the workers on the machines. They simply assigned miners to a machine and told them they had a certain amount of time to discover how to use it. To make matters worse, at first the machines were placed in the same size small chambers as hand loaders had used, with little ventilation. This caused an increase in miners' asthma, which we now call black lung. These are just some of the reasons that the Illinois coal miners were discontent. They felt that the president of the UMWA, John L. Lewis, had colluded with the coal companies to allow unsafe machines to be brought into the coal mines. These are some of the important dates in 1932 that you will learn about in your tour of the Christian County Coal Mine Museum. And these are some of the important dates that you'll learn about in your tour that come from 1933. This is an authentic photograph of a caravan of cars that left Christian County on August 24th, 1932 to picket the southern Illinois coal mines in protest of the UMW collusion with the coal companies. They were diverted by state police toward Mulkeytown, Illinois, where they were ambushed. Angry over what they called the Mulkeytown Massacre, miners left the United Mine Workers. On September 1st, 1932, they formed the Progressive Miners of America in Gillespie, Illinois. Their first meeting of the Progressives was held in Manners Park in Taylorville, Illinois on September 6th.
See, we was a strike breaker. As well as good and hot. So we was strike breakers in the little town of Langley over here. Because the mine's tore down now. But we was strike breakers during the war, during the trouble.
Yeah. Okay, how did the community feel about you being a strike breaker?
You should never live through that.
Really?
That was horrible.
What was it like?
Well, your best friends turn against you, call your names, cuss you. To beat up on my dad, my uncle beat up my dad.
Your uncle did?
My friends.
Oh, okay.
Beat my uncle and my dad up. My dad's face was like that. Oh, I tell you, I'll never forget that. Then when they all seen we was making money, they would never nobody had a job. Progressive trouble wasn't working.
Yeah.
So they all started drifting one at a time to the mine.
Yeah, back to the UMW.
Yeah. I've hated them ever since, every one of them.
Yeah.
Well, it was bad. They would get up and cuss you right in the schoolroom, and
the progressive children would?
Yes, and the teachers wouldn't do a thing about it. And I lost about 22 pounds that one year. So I had to leave here and go to Taylorville for my last year of high school because of all the trouble and the talk. And my father was a company man, he wasn't even a union man.
Right. Okay. Were there other children that you could identify with, that you could hang around with then, that were company children?
Very few that felt comfortable even walking with you. Now, I did have a couple of friends that would walk home with me. It was about a little over a mile from the school. And there was one girl especially that would walk down Springfield Street with me of a night.
How old were you at that time then?
I was a freshman.
Freshman in high school. Well, that must
started.
That must have been tough in high school then to have that type of problem.
Of course, it went on, for a while because I was a freshman when I started here. I might have been a sophomore before it got going good. And then one time when I was 16 and I had a boyfriend that lived down Springfield Street that didn't work in the coal mines or anything. And he had come up to the mine yard to visit me, and on his way home, when he had to cross in front of an alley, somebody shot at him.
I'll be done.
They had militia here, but it didn't do any good because they had lists of people and cars that weren't to be bothered that they passed out to each following militia group come in. The only one that wouldn't play games with them was the group out of Chicago, and they were only here 2 weeks and they never did come back. A segment of the militia, I don't know what battalion or whatever it was, when they come in here and they were told what to do and when to do it and who to do it with, and they said, we were brought in here to keep the peace and we're going to patrol the streets, and they ain't about to tell us a damn thing. We're going to do it our way.
Now, who was telling them to do all this?
The company officials.
Peabody?
Peabody officials. Argus.
The Mowequa coal mine disaster on December 24th, 1932, brought the conflict between United Mine Workers and the Progressives to a slowdown. Both sides struggled to help the coal mining residents of nearby Mowequa, Illinois, a town that was partly in Christian County.
When the mine exploded on Saturday, December 24th, 1932 at 8:10 a.m., what were you doing when you heard the news about it?
I was just getting out of bed.
Okay.
And I heard the whistle blow. And when I heard that whistle blow, me and my brother both, we knew that something had happened at the mine because, see, they blow this whistle and they blow it several times when there's an accident or something. So the first thing we do is got into our clothes, and we were over there at the coal mine in just a few minutes.
Okay.
Ann and I have the two boys, Mike and George. we spent the night making coffee for the state police made the house their headquarters.
Yes.
Mrs. Corby, they put her to bed under shock.
I'm sure.
I think the doctors kept her sedated. She had her husband and 2 sons down there. She was really bad shape.
I understand.
I went, next morning I went down to my friend Beulah Wagaman. She had married Frank Ryman. That was the couple that we used to double date with.
Yes.
I was at her house when Frank came in and told me, he said, Margaret, they just brought John up. And I remember running all the way down back.
Yes.
To Corby's place. It was a nasty, cold weather. It was just a little below freezing. And there was a heavy fog. And I think that's probably responsible for for the explosion.
The black
condition
damp
of the atmosphere.
Yes. Because
then we had to make the funeral arrangements. They didn't get John's brother and father out for a couple of days. It was confused about that, but they found them together. They were so identical in height and appearance. The only way they could tell them apart at first was the fact that Mr. Corby had a broken foot.
Oh.
But he had taken his coat off and wrapped it around Andy's head. Mm-hmm. And they died from the black damp.
Yes.
The follows. John was in a coal car. And they said that a slab of slate had fallen and partially covered the car, kept him from being crushed. And he obviously had thrown up his hands to save his face because his hands were bandaged and his hair was scorched back from his forehead. Mm-hmm. So he was caught in the full flash of the explosion. His watch was stopped at 10 minutes after 8.
10 minutes after 8.
And the odd thing about it is that when he was home the weekend before, he told me, he said he had bought a new suit for Christmas. And he said, I only got 1 pair of pants with it. And that's the suit he was buried in. I never saw it until I saw it.
The newly formed Progressive Union was unable to provide assistance at the Moweaqua disaster, leading to a frustration and militancy that led to a battle with the UMW and mine company in Tovey 10 days later.
3 or 4 of us used to ride together at the mine, and this one time, I think it was about January the 3rd, this is 1933. Of course, at the meantime, we had pickets lining both sides of the road at the entrance to the mine. And this one particular night, we noticed there's nobody leaving the mine yard. And word got around that the Progressives were going to try to keep us in the mine yard all night. So, in the meantime, someone come up with a bright idea. They cut off pieces of, I think it was some kind of cable. I never worked below, so I don't know too much about, I think it's cable that served power for the either cut machine or load machine or something. And they cut them like a billy club. And they said, well, we're going out and beat the hell out of those guys, so we can get out and go home. So they proceeded to tie white armbands around our arms.
What was that?
That was so you could distinguish me from you out in the dark. See, it was dark. This was in the wintertime, see. Or, yeah, in January, sure. And I believe we got off at either 4 or 4:30 then. Hell, it was nearly dark. And, well, it was dark time they ever got together, all that stuff. So we proceeded to go out there, and I don't know. We no sooner got out that mine gate, and all of a sudden it sounded like war broke loose. Boy, you hear a rat-a-tat-tat, boom, boom, you know. And me and my brother and one of our brothers and a guy by the name of, I'll think of his name pretty soon. We run into an old garage. And then when it kind of subsided, the shooting, I run back into the mine yard. Well, I know what I want to tell you. When we got out there, those people had a white armband around their damn arms, too. So you didn't know who was who.
Yeah. They didn't intentionally do that because they knew you were going to.
Yeah, someone had learned that they was tying white armbands, and that's what they had around their arms.
Huh.
And you couldn't distinguish friend from foe,
Yeah.
so to speak. But before I got out there, as I said, I was just a kid. I weighed about 115, 20 pounds, and when they started shooting, I had enough sense to get back in that mine yard. But I remember one thing distinctly. They started bringing guys back in that were shot back into the mine yard. And I remember one guy, I looked in through the up at the office after the battle was over with, and I guess those progressive either took off or something. They brought one guy, and I'll never forget, he had his shorts down there, and he shot right through both cheeks of his rear. I can remember that just as plain as day. Ain't that how you remember something like that?
Yeah. Was it with a rifle bullet? Or
I think a rifle or a pistol bullet. Yeah, I think I'd say a pistol. But I just thought how forcing that get right right in the flesh part of his rear.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
All right. Now, was that the day that Emma Camerlado was shot?
Yes, that was the same night. Yes. As a matter of fact, years later, I was a good friend of this Mr. Camerlado's son, who was Dominic.
On January 26, 1933, a socialist named Agnes Burns Week from Spillertown in Illinois organized a march of 10,000 members of the Women's Auxiliary on the state capital of Springfield, Illinois. They urged the newly elected Governor Horner to recognize the Progressive Miners of America.
See, then the miners, they formed a new union, which was called the Progressive Miners of America. Their intentions were to get rid of John L. Lewis. And of course, since I was in the grocery store, why, you know, you felt like you had to go along with the rest of them. And I joined the auxiliary. I joined then the women had their auxiliary, and they had their first meeting in Springfield at the KC Hall in Springfield, and I was one of the delegates to go to that.
What year was that? 1932?
Yeah, in the fall of 1932. I was very, and then, we'd go and load up on the truck and go on these picket lines, you know. I would do that too. Get up and be there by 5 o'clock, you know, trying to stop the miners from going to work.
What
To this day, I think I'm still a progressive, you know, because I think that it was a good thing that they started, but I guess they just weren't strong enough. And the strike just went on for weeks and months and years, and it finally broke their backs, I guess. And we was under martial law then for about 18 months.
The Christian County Coal Mine Wars was now on. Over the next several years, there were dozens of shootings, bombings, and even assassinations. Bodies were showing up in the ditches and bobbing to the surface in the South Fork River and creeks. Eventually, the UMW and mechanization prevailed. During the final years of his life, historian Carl Oblinger researched the 1937-38 trial of 36 progressive mine workers of America. He believed that his own father, who had worked for the FBI during this time period, had helped in the stealing of the court minutes from the Sangamon County records. The records have never been found. As you tour the Christian County Coal Mine Museum, you will find many newspaper clippings, magazines, and other artifacts that discuss the Christian County Coal Mine Wars. You will read about how both the United Mine Workers and the Progressive Mine Workers blamed one another for railroad bombings, how the judge at the trial put a stopper in the PMW defense claim that the UMW was to blame for the mine war. During the trial, many of the witnesses for the prosecution admitted that they had been paid large sums of money to return to the United Mine Workers of America. On December 11th, the prosecution claimed that former progressive miner and now sheriff of Saline County handed out guns to progressives who then proceeded to attack the Harrisburg coal mine. On the other hand, the defense claimed the Harrisburg gunfight was really only the Peabody Coal Company thugs who were firing a machine gun at houses and blaming the progressives. Only shell casings from machine guns were found at the scene. The PMW defense witnesses fell mysteriously sick. Witnesses for the UMW who could do them damage fell mysteriously dead. Progressive mine worker witnesses were mysteriously assassinated by drive-by gunmen on state highways. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, even the attorneys engaged in fisticuffs in the courthouse hallways just outside the witness protection room. Perhaps the most colorful testimony for the defense came from ex-convict Vernon Vickery, whose own parents then came on and called their son crazy. On December 19th, 1937, 36 progressives were convicted in a Springfield, Illinois trial for racketeering. They served 5 years in prison in Leavenworth. This essentially ended the struggle between the United Mine Workers and the Progressive Miners of America, although the progressives continued to operate in a few coal mines until 1999. While this brings us to the end of the Christian County Coal Mine Wars, it's just the beginning of the modern age of coal mining and the continuing struggles of coal miners to acquire better wages and working conditions. As you visit the Christian County Coal Mine Museum, you will learn many more fascinating facts about the industry that made America the greatest economic force on planet Earth.
Author's note: with the closing of the Christian County mines in the 1950s, an era ended. As one by one the mines were stripped of all their valuable machinery, and the mine shafts finally filled in, those miners who spent a major part of their lives in them must have felt as one does at a funeral when the casket is laid to rest. Voices in many languages must surely still echo through abandoned chambers where boys became men and sometimes lost their lives.
Kevin Corley's Christian County Coal Mine novels are available in the Christian County Coal Mine Museum's lobby for $15. or at hardballpress.com or on Amazon in paperback or Kindle for $5.99. Corley's novel Sundown Town, about Pana in 1898-99, is also available in the lobby or on Amazon. All proceeds go to the Christian County Coal Mine Museum. And just for you hunters, here's a book by the owner and curator of the Christian County Coal Mine Museum, Chuck Martin. It is also available in the lobby. The following are a list of resource books that were used for the production of this documentary. Most of them are available online.